ABC Listen. Podcasts, radio, news, music and more.
Welcome to Conversations. This year, Conversations is 20 years old, and we've been looking into the archives to bring you some of our favourites from the last 2 decades. And today, it's Donna Duggan, who shared the story of falling in love with Africa and with an African man. My guest on Conversations today is Donna Duggan. Donna is a woman with an adventurous spirit. It took her to Tanzania in Africa. And there she met a local man, Nas, and they fell in love. Together, Nas and Donna created a family and a business until an accident changed everything. Hi, Donna.
Hi, Sarah.
Where did you first take yourself off to overseas?
I first went to London as a 19-year-old. Had an interview with a brilliant family at the Notting Hill Carnival with all the bells and whistles flying around me, and decided that I would stay with them for the next couple of years as their nanny.
And what kind of family was it?
An amazing sort of old world family. So I had a beautiful stay-at-home mother who became a really close friend.
Stay-at-home mother and a nanny.
Correct. Life is good in London. in Notting Hill.
Circles, yeah.
Yes. And the father was in the finance industry, so he travelled a lot. And I was the lady who woke up in the morning and got the children breakfast and walked them around Kensington Gardens, and that was it.
What kind of bosses were they to you, Donna?
They were amazing. Even when I first arrived, they said, we want to really make your experience special and enjoy. This is a great step for you in terms of your adventures in life. And can you please write down the 10 things that you want to do on your travel wish list? And I said, no problem at all. So I started to write them down.
What did you put down?
Well, I'd never had a white Christmas. So I wrote down White Christmas. I told them I wanted to learn Spanish. I told them I wanted to go sailing off Cape Cod because, I don't know, I must have read a book or something at that stage. What else did I say? I told them I wanted to go skiing. I'd never been skiing.
What did they want to do with this list, just so that you had a sense
They
of
wanted to tick the list off for me while I was working with them.
You're kidding me.
Seriously.
This is the fantasy of the working holiday in London. This is very different from my experience,
This is
Donna.
the best of the best.
Which stands out from you among that bucket list that your employers worked out with you?
Well, the White Christmas and skiing in the French Alps was pretty special. And then they used to let me off work early 3 days a week so I could go and learn Spanish. And then I remember one time we had Christmas in Jordan, went to Petra, because they wanted to get away from the cold, and I said that sounded great. And growing up, I read these, mystical, magical stories of Petra in Jordan, and I thought, well, I'll put that one on the list. That sounds fabulous. And so we did it.
Was that a hard position to leave? How could you leave this generous family in Notting Hill?
I know. Sadly, the limit is a 2-year working visa in the UK. But until today, I'm still in contact with them and still great friends with them. So,
when your working visa came to an end, what did you do next?
I actually finished a few months before with the family, and then I went to work in the Holiday Inn in King's Cross, just waitressing. And a friend of mine that I'd met there was a Danish girl, and while she wanted to work through the summer, I wanted to still sort of travel because I'd saved enough. So I went off to Europe by myself and wandered around. And when she was ready, then we decided to fly to Africa, because I'd told her this great story about when I was in my basement flat in Notting Hill. I'd seen a documentary on the BBC about Zanzibar. And I think it was 2 Dutch girls or 2 Swedish sisters or something, and they'd set up this little bungalow on the beach. And, after the grey of London, I think that became on my list.
Zanzibar's just got one of those wonderful exotic names, doesn't it? It's sort of like a poem just saying Zanzibar.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Even saying it springs up images of amazing things, yeah.
How did you travel down to Zanzibar?
We flew from London to Cape Town. And then we decided just amongst ourselves, because of our budget and because, we were young and silly maybe, that we wanted to get up to Cairo from Cape Town but not fly. So we was, okay, so we'll walk and we'll do, catch buses and trains and all that sort of thing. And sometimes when there's not a train, you have to hop on the bicycle. And sometimes when not a bicycle, you have to go on the post truck. And so, yes, we started off like that.
You must have had some fairly hair-raising journeys on that
Some
trip,
really
did you?
funny things, really funny. I look back now and I think, thank goodness there was no emails or internet to let your mother know, you know.
Well, how often were you in touch with your family back home?
Not very often. Every few months maybe I would do the reverse charges call. I would do that. Yes.
Were they worried about you?
No, I don't think so. Because, like growing up, I've always been capable and I always had common sense. So they, if there was a decision to be made, I think I was always going to make the right one for my own well-being.
And when you got to Zanzibar, Donna, was it all that you had hoped? Was it as exotic as it sounds?
It was hilarious. We stayed in this little guest house near the port. It's really higgledy-piggledy, narrow alleys and streets and this beautiful sort of Omani Arabian architecture that's peeling and cracking and falling and all the sights and sounds and smells. So we stayed in there and then finally we figured out how to get to the coast. Then we hopped in the back of a ute and off we trottled with about 10 other people. And I remember we stayed at a place called Wedjudere, sort of halfway up on the east coast. And it was a little guest house and it was a room, no windows, no water inside, no toilet inside, and this was this glamorous place I was going to. And I was completely happy with it. And then we'd walk up onto the roof to have papaya with lime juice for breakfast every morning. And then this Zanzibari spread, which is quite common, almost like a mini gold bullion of bread.
So after this first trip to Tanzania and other parts of Africa, had it grabbed a hold of you somehow?
I think so.
Did you love it because it was so different from Australia or
I think
London?
I loved it because it was so simple. I think because it was simple, it was just wake up, do what you got to do for the day and then that's it, and go home again.
So after that first trip to Tanzania, how quickly did you manage to go back again?
12 months later.
What were you doing in that time?
I came home and I said, right. So I did Brett's Wharf for a few months and then I worked up on the whale watching boats out of Harvey Bay and I saved up all my money, and another friend from here said, what had you been doing when you were travelling around Africa, I'd seen a few of your postcards. So I explained to her and she said, oh, great, I'll do that as well. When can we go? So yeah, off we toddled again, and with the same sort of theory of, no planes and just wander around until we can get where we want to be.
And did you go on a safari on this trip?
That time I went on a safari. I can remember it was $500 for 5 days.
Oh, that's a bargain.
That is a bargain, in an old white Land Rover, and the roads, that give you a nice African massage.
What sort of landscapes are there in Tanzania? What do you see in the country?
It's not dissimilar, really, to Australia especially the towns. Like, towns remind me of, for example, Moshi reminds me of that 1970s Toowoomba. The angle parking and the jacaranda trees and the red dirt. There is a familiar sort of side to it. But also, once you go west from Arusha, it's that big, wide open spaces, the Great Rift Valley Wall, and then you sort of climb up through the highlands and go down again into the Serengeti. It feels like the land before time. You feel like, especially going from Ngorongoro to Serengeti, you feel like at any minute a dinosaur's going to cross in front of me. It's got that really old, ancient feel to it.
Well, Serengeti, this is where some of the earliest human fossils have ever been found.
Correct, yeah, Oltupai Gorge.
Where do most people in Tanzania live?
I think like most countries in the main cities, but a lot of Tanzania is made up of subsistence farming and rural, but everyone's dream, I guess, like it was here in days gone by, is let's get out of the country towns, let's go and find our dream in the big city. So they're having that sort of process going on as well.
Is it a country that's had some of the sort of civil wars and conflict that might be known from other parts of Africa?
No, very, very peaceful. And I think that's probably why I enjoyed and wanted to go back to Tanzania, because there was that feeling of just feeling safe and genuinely welcomed. Certainly in Tanzania, and people say this, even clients that we go with now today say, I left my heart in Tanzania because I felt honestly so welcome. It wasn't, a smile and a robotic gesture. It was really, people wanted to spend time with me.
What language do people speak, Donna?
Swahili. Well, there's 120 tribes in Tanzania, 120 cultures, 120 languages, but they're all united by Swahili. So I think that has a lot to do with peace and harmony as well. It was very smart.
There is a colonial history in Tanzania,
Correct.
as in most parts of Africa. What
Yes.
European countries have tried to get a slice of the pie in Tanzania?
European initially was Germany, so German East Africa, and then after World War I became a British colony.
And what sort of legacy has this had, like in terms of religion, say, that people practice now in Tanzania?
Even before the Germans were there, it had a lot of, especially on the coast, influence from the Omanis. You know, at one point, even the capital of Oman was Zanzibar.
Wow.
So it was a remote sort of capital. So
Even more remote than Canberra.
even more remote than Canberra, imagine. So you have a lot of, on the coast, Islam is very prominent. And as you move in towards the centre of the country into the west, it gets more prominent with Christianity. So, you know, as a general, you could say 50-50.
And is that a source of conflict in Tanzania,
No.
the Muslim-Christian divide?
No, there is no judgment placed on your religion, your tribe, anything.
In terms of foreign nations wanting to make that part of Africa a colony, what were they looking for?
Well, I think originally Zanzibar, being a spice island, was huge on the trades. You know, you can look back through history, even from the Persian trades.
What sort of spices from Zanzibar?
Cloves, the biggest clove plantations in the world. Even now you can go and see clove plantations, and then nutmeg, and how black pepper grows on the trees. And yeah. And then, of course, there was the slave trade, which was very heavily influenced by the Arab traders. And then the Germans were looking for land, and Tanzania is hugely rich in natural resources.
Is there any historical legacy of that slave trade that you can see in Tanzania now?
Well, on Zanzibar, there's certainly a place where you can go and visit the old slave market and where they were held before being shipped. And even on the mainland, there's a place called Bagamoyo. And in Swahili, when you translate that, it means lay down my heart or lay down your heart. So it's a place where they went from Bagamoyo across to Zanzibar, prepped onto the boats and gone. And of course, with the slave trade comes that whole ivory trade as well. It's very much interlinked.
So, Donna, you were still a young woman when you'd made this second trip to Tanzania. How much of a hold did this part of Africa have on you back then?
It was definitely, I missed it before I left. So I think it was to do with people. And so I knew that at some point I would go back, but I wanted to go back not as a tourist, but as contributing to something.
Tell me about people. What was it about Tanzanians?
One time I was on a train from, it actually came all the way from Victoria Falls, but it's called Tazara. So I went up through Zambia, and then in the middle of the night you hop off the train at Kapiri-Mposhi and you transfer to another station and you hop on again, you go through Zambia and you get through to Tanzania. And, you know, when you go through the villages, and I didn't know it was for 3 days, this train, so I didn't, you know, do a supermarket shop before I hopped on. So, you know, we're out the window trying to get what we could to buy, to eat. And, you know, I got oranges, sugar cane, and then, the local brew. And I was like, I think I'll stick with the sugar cane and the oranges now. But even when we were changing countries on this train and you didn't have the currency, you know, you could still talk with people. And I can remember very clearly people saying, don't worry about it, just take the sugar cane. I understand you're in a predicament sort of here. You know, and even going through villages, people say, can't you please come and have a meal with us? So you would go, and they're literally chopping up their last 3 tomatoes to give to you. I mean, that's pretty special, giving away what you don't have even.
So it was that generosity that
Absolutely.
that sparked something
Absolutely.
in you.
Kindness.
So with that thought, I want to be able to do something to contribute to this part of the world. What did you do next? What did you decide that you had that you could contribute?
Then I came back here and I did a nursing degree. So while I was doing my nursing degree, of sort of baking cakes on the weekends or even during the weeks. And I eventually raised enough funds where I'd had my degree, I'd saved enough money.
What, through selling the cakes?
Through selling my cakes in my mum and dad's fruit and vegetable shop.
Really?
Yes,
You
and
must be a pretty good cake maker.
I got pretty good by the end. I didn't even look at a recipe book at the end. I raised enough money for me to pay to do a volunteering thing and my flights and everything. And I also fundraised so I could buy immunisations and clinical sort of things.
So you went back to work or to volunteer in a hospital then as a nurse?
In Moshi, I worked at 2 clinics in the very poor areas of Moshi, one called Majengo Clinic, one called Pasua Clinic. And basically sort of 8 till 4 every day, I'd sort of wander down to the clinic, and it was childhood immunisation, it was women's health, HIV education. I didn't do any sort of medication for that sort of thing, and birthing clinics.
What kind of contrast was it from the training you'd got in Brisbane in terms of nursing?
Chalk and cheese. It was very much the iron beds and, shouted out by the midwife because you weren't giving birth fast enough.
Really?
Seriously.
So a fairly stern approach to medicine.
Very stern approach. And I was, you can't do that. But they did.
Did you feel that you had enough skills to be useful in that situation?
Yeah, I was good with the immunisation and the, come and weigh your baby, and I've got to record it all. But, then there were some things, I had medical terminology in Swahili because I'd tried to learn a little bit of that sort of thing before I left. But I don't speak perfect Swahili. Someone doesn't speak English at all. And in fact, they don't even read or write. How do you give someone, information to leave the hospital of how to look after their baby once they're gone? And they literally just sign X on the spot. Yes, I've understood what you've told me, X, So you were doing good, but it also hurt at the same time.
You say you were living in a place called Moshi. Tell me about that. What kind of place is Moshi?
Moshi is at the foothills of Kilimanjaro. It's that Toowoomba, old school Toowoomba town that I was telling you about.
I love the comparison with Toowoomba.
Yeah, it's hilarious. I lived sort of in a village just on the outskirts, so it was in amongst banana plantations, really, in literally a village where there was sort of nothing nearby. It took us probably half an hour to walk into town.
Were you living with locals or other foreigners? Who were your neighbours? I was living
with other volunteers, and they may have been medical or through education, or there was one that was a WIS, which is like a women's rights group.
And when you weren't at the clinic, Donna, how were you spending your time?
I'd go off on little adventures and, walk to the waterfalls or go into Arusha or go to Dar es Salaam. And then obviously eventually I married my neighbour there, so obviously there were other activities as well.
Well, tell me about marrying your neighbour. When did you first set eyes on the fellow who ended up being your husband?
I think it was a couple of weeks after we were there, and the reason I spiked interest maybe is because he had no interest. It's the age-old...
That old one.
The old one, the same thing. Everyone else was like, oh, can you come and buy this? My son needs shoes. Or, there was constant chaos when you're walking along. But he was just like, hi, whatever. I was like, hey, you, excuse me. But he told my mum later, he said, as soon as I saw her, I knew I would marry her.
Really?
Yes.
So how did you go beyond the hi, how are you, to going on dates together? Who made the first move?
I don't know. But I do remember that there was actually, as I'm saying, Tanzania is so wonderful here, actually bandits came into the compound and robbed and beat up one of the guys. And then he got me and a few friends out and took us into Arusha for the weekend. He said, no, I'm not having you stay there. And maybe that, rescuing the maiden had something to do with it.
How quickly did you find yourself having pretty strong feelings for Nas?
Very early on. But you know why? Because he was open and honest. And maybe it was that Tanzanian thing. He was just saying how he felt and how he saw things going. I came from downtown Brisbane where no one would, admit that they liked anyone or had a plan, So I think it was just refreshing and nice to just chat openly.
And he was easy to be open about his feelings for you.
Absolutely.
Did you have much in common in those early months together?
Probably not.
I mean, what language were you speaking with one another?
He had some English. He had pretty good English, actually. And I had about, a dozen Swahili words.
In medical terminology.
In medical terms. So, bring your arm here so I can jab you was very romantic, apparently.
And what did you learn about his background?
He'd grown up in Arusha, some schooling, a hard life. He used to tell me primary school he wasn't really wearing shoes to school, and, his school bag was a, plastic shopping bag and that sort of thing. And then eventually he would stay in the main tourist part of Arusha and, wheel and deal at the clock tower type of thing. Yeah.
So what was he doing for work when you met him?
He had a little shop selling beaded sandals.
Did you buy a pair of those?
No. He plays hard to get, I play hard to get.
So once the two of you started going out and acknowledged that you had these feelings for each other, what was the conversation about what that would mean for your future?
Well, I knew it was easier for me to go back there than it is for him to come here to Australia. And of course, he didn't have the education or the skills to walk into a job here. So he said to me, when you come back, I'll really have to concentrate and study and get a job. I think I'll learn computers. And I said, no, every Tom, Dick and Harry is learning computers. Let's do something else. It's not going to help you. I said, I tell you what, there's two things in Tanzania where you can make money at that time. And it was mining or tourism. And of course, we know nothing about mining, so tourism it was, So basically, when I came back here for a few months, his project was to get his driver's license. And he did. And then he started guiding college and things like that.
Did you get any pushback from anyone over there or here about your relationship?
Never. The only pushback we ever had was in New York City. Yeah, where an African-American man came in, with all the words in the world, and Nas was like, just keep walking. These people are weird.
What did your parents think, Donna, about you planning to move over and live in Tanzania?
I think for my parents, even today, nothing comes as a shock. She's always been a little left of centre, wanting more than the average maybe, or wanting to see more and experience more. So I don't think they were worried at all.
Tell me a little bit more about your mum and dad. Where did they meet one another?
My mum and dad, so they both grew up in Stanthorpe. My dad was my uncle's best friend. So, he looked at the little sister. And that was when they were 14, 15 years old. They got married when they were 19 and 20 and worked most of their life, worked together in business. So fruit shops, wholesale retail, supplying not only, walking customers, but, football clubs, RSLs, restaurants, cafes, yes.
Do you think some of that adventurous spirit that you have comes from them?
Yes, because at 19 and 20, they got married and moved to Brisbane. That was, they were coming to the big spoke. They hopped in the old Holden and off they trotted down to Brisbane. So maybe.
The Zanzibar of the East Coast.
Exactly.
Your family suffered a loss a few years after you moved to Tanzania. Mm-hmm. What happened in 2009?
2009, I can remember getting a call from my mum, and I couldn't understand what she was saying. It was sort of sobbing down the phone. I was like, just breathe and tell me. And she said, Darren's dead. And that was my brother. And he had just been married, sort of 17 months before, just been relocated to Abu Dhabi to help them set up their education curriculums. And him and his new wife went for a long weekend to Germany, and he was killed there, hit by a train one evening when he missed the train home. So
you got that phone call when you were in Tanzania?
I got that phone call. I was in Tanzania and, literally hopped on a plane and went to Germany and identified him, and his wife and I came home and organised for him to come home.
What a heartbreaking thing to have to do.
It's a horrible thing, but I didn't want my parents to do it. So quickly go and sort it out before they have to realise what's happening, type of thing.
And then you came back with his body for the funeral.
Correct.
In Australia.
Correct, yes.
Did you consider at that time maybe my mum and dad need me to be here with them?
Yes, absolutely. And even from before then, Nas and I, our plan was always eventually to come and live in Australia. But we were both of the thought that we don't want to come here and start again. I don't want to come here and work for somebody after you've sort of been running your own business. So we wanted to reach a certain point where we could happily juggle both, maybe.
Well, tell me about the early days of the company that you set up together. How did you start? Once you flew back and Nas had got his driver's licence, what was the next thing?
The next step was getting all the registrations and the permits and the licences to make sure, we were allowed to do that thing. And then we're thinking, oh, hang on, we need customers. So through my volunteer connection, we would drive to Moshi pick people up and take them on a 3-day safari. So we'd pick them up on a Friday afternoon, go to Lake Manyara, sleep in these dome tents with sleeping bags on the floor, no pillows. That was highly luxurious. And then Serengeti, Ngorongoro, and back by Sunday night, back to Moshi. That was one itinerary. And the other itinerary, we would pick people up and go for an overnight in a Maasai village. So we would pick them up. They'd still stay in tents and that, but they would do all the Maasai things. They would fetch water. They would slaughter a goat. They'd sing and dance with the warriors. And yes, that's where immersion began, I think.
Was it a crowded market? Were there lots of operators offering safari in Tanzania when you started?
There were, but I think not where we were starting. So that was a good little niche for us to get us started. And also there wasn't the accommodation options there were before. There wasn't even the road system. So, I feel like we have somehow grown with tourism in Tanzania and evolved.
You got pregnant, I think, fairly early on. Did that change the way you ran things at the company?
No, it didn't stop us. Even now, our guides laugh at me. They go, "Oh, Mama, I remember you were, 7, 8 months pregnant and carrying the folding chairs up the hill so you could give people a view of where they were going into the Maasai land, and then you'd waddle back down the hill." I said, yes. And even to Kilimanjaro, because I was the best driver in the company at that point. So I had to take the old Land Rover, no power steering, 8 months pregnant, and drive people up to the trailhead to start trekking on Kilimanjaro.
I'm amazed your son didn't come early.
Yeah, I'm amazed as well. I still had to push him.
Podcast, broadcast, and online. This is Conversations with Sarah Konoski. Find out more about the Conversations podcast. Just head to abc.net.au/conversations.
It wasn't all smooth sailing, though. You had a rough time with one of the first guides that you worked with. What happened?
He was one of my assistant guides on Kilimanjaro the first time I climbed. And so we struck up a friendship, and then Nas, came along. And so the three of us actually set up the company originally. But when I brought Rami, my son, to Australia for the first time to show my father, he decided to go into all our bank accounts and everything and just clean us out. So when we got back with a newborn baby, we were starting at zero again.
Donna, could you go to the police or get any of that money back?
No, you would never get the money back. And yes, report to the police, but what's the process? We needed to get working again to build ourselves up again. So, we both decided there was no time to waste. We didn't want bureaucracy and back and forth, and we just got stuck into it again.
How did you how did you go about making your company different from the other safaris that were on offer already?
I think already we were different because we had Nas and I. We had, his local knowledge, and then you had my sort of efficiency side of things. So, right from the start, Nas was more out and about, creating and, trailblazing, so to speak, out there. And then I was in the office making connections and preparing itineraries and trying to get people to come across.
What about relationships with local people? How did you understand what that should look like?
We both agreed that whatever we did, we wanted to give back. So right from the start, the whole intention was to make money, to give away money, pretty much. And we did right from the start. We started building sort of nursery schools in Maasai villages mainly, because there was a gap between a child coming from herding goats to going into primary school, which is taught in Swahili. So you have a child herding goats with incredible gross motor skills, but no Swahili, going into a primary classroom where they stand up, sit down, and in a foreign language, so and to use fine motor skill. So we have like Our nursery programs are normally 2 years, where we get them to learn Swahili. We get them to actually hold a pencil and write without snapping the whole pencil because they don't know their own strength. And to understand that at a certain time you come, at a certain time you leave, there's a break time. We have this porridge and you don't sort of throw the cup at someone when you're finished. It's a process, but it's success. It's a good stepping stone.
So part of the funds that you were making out of the safari was going into setting up schools for kids.
Correct, yeah. Correct.
And I guess you were pretty burnt after that first experience with the other person in the business. When you were hiring guides after that, what were you looking for? What makes someone a good guide for foreigners, I guess?
Do you know what? I think anyone can be a good guide. I think it can be a skill that's taught. I mean, you have to have that intrinsic love, yes. But I think the most important thing, and this is the thing we talk about in our staff meetings a lot, if you are not a good person, if your heart is not clean, you'll never be a good father, a good husband, a good son, a good guide, a good driver, a good anything, because you yourself are not good. So that's the angle where we've always come from. You can certainly see who's doing it for love and who's doing it for money. Absolutely. And while you do have to do it for money, that's the reality. But you have to have a passion and a love and it's not, I mean, it's a whole lifestyle. These men are with their clients. They pick them up from the airport. They're with them 24 hours a day when they're on safari. They're their agony aunt. They're their doctor. They're not only just their guide and their driver, So it's a big job and it's an exhausting job. And when you think you're leaving your family, in Arusha or in Moshi or Dar es Salaam or wherever you're leaving your family, for at least a week at a time, it's a big strain on a family and for the wife at home to run households in certain situations. So,
how many people did you end up having working with you in the company?
We have almost 200 on the books now. So we have probably about 120 of those are permanent staff, salaried every month between camps and guides and mechanics and upholsterers and office administration. And then there's about 80 that work on a sort of not a casual basis, like they work every day, but they work on a contract basis. So, doing welding and refurbishing vehicles and all that sort of stuff.
It's a huge operation.
It's a big operation. There's lots of moving parts.
You must be surrounded by extraordinary wildlife. What do you love? What makes your heart sing?
You know what? It's birds.
Not the lions, not the elephants.
Well, I love it all. I love it all. But, I'm the odd person in the vehicle that looks out and looks for a bird while they're looking at, the leopard and the cubs on the right side of the vehicle. I'm looking at the left, looking at this pretty bird in the tree. They think I'm nuts.
What's the bird life like?
Stunning. It's a bit like sort of Central Australia where, you have this sort of one colour, almost bland sort of feeling, but then the birds are colourful and, the song is beautiful. It's very, very similar. For example, even in Tarangire, one of the national parks, there's 350 bird species. Serengeti is over 500 different bird species. It's just incredible numbers and stunning, so different.
How can you predict when animals are going to be visible?
I think you can learn a certain amount from books and Google, but I think a lot comes from experience. Like a lot of our guides, they don't follow the normal path of a safari. They will go sort of off the beaten path to just meander and figure. But a lot of it has to do with weather. A lot of it has to do, that the seasonal type of thing, whether there's been rain or no rain, where are the vehicles, a lot of vehicles. Some animals, they don't want that, so they'll go off in a different way. So it's really reading your environment, and I think that only comes from experience.
You must have had some foreign tourists with unrealistic expectations of what they're going to see. How do you handle that?
The first thing is to try not to laugh. When an American lady many years ago, and she was a well-to-do, lovely American lady, but she just didn't have any idea. And, can I please give this carrot to those zebras? Well, no, I don't think you should do that. You're just having no. And the other funny thing is when people write me an email and they say, I want to see the migration, I want to see the lions and the tigers, and I go, well, the tigers, I think you'll go to India first en route to Tanzania. But yeah, some people are unrealistic. Some people sort of worry about air conditioning in the vehicle when it's an open vehicle or it's too dusty. And so we make a joke of it and call it, safari powder and all of this sort of thing. But, people think going on safari is going to be easy. It's a holiday. It's not. It's an adventure and it's hard work.
You're painting this description of a very busy work, but it sounds joyful and exciting and full of great challenges. I mean, I guess all that you and Nas dreamed of making together. Tell me what was happening on the last morning that you spent with Nas.
Chaos. House of chaos. He was actually supposed to fly the day before and there wasn't any space.
Where was he flying to?
Oh, he was flying from Arusha to go to the Serengeti because we were just about to build a new camp, and he was going to meet some national park rangers to work out where to put some roads to open up that area for game driving. And he was supposed to fly on the 8 o'clock, and then that became fully booked. So he ended up flying on sort of the 10:15. And by 8:30, I was saying to him, you've really got to drop, our daughter at school and get to the airport for check-in. Yeah. And, he's got his John Legend music on and singing away in the shower, not a worry in the world. So eventually he gets down and they jump in the car and they reverse out, and then he drove back in all of a sudden, and I go out the front. Why? What now? What have you forgotten? I forgot to kiss you, my wife. I was like, oh, okay, well, that's acceptable. So then we went, and he went and he dropped Isha off and he hopped on the plane, and he wrote me a beautiful message, sent me a beautiful message about, I love you, my wife. I can't believe how far we've come and how far we've yet to go. I can't wait to grow old together.
While he was on the plane?
While he was taking off. This is part of the openness of saying how he feels, so that was kind of a fitting last message, I guess.
What did you hear next?
I got a phone call from the air flight company at about 11:30 saying that they'd lost radio contact. And you have some clients on the flight. And in not mincing my words, I let a few fly and said, very well that's not my clients, because it's my husband, my brother-in-law, and a dear friend who works for us, all living in my house, all left from my house. So, and then I started to, is this normal? What does that mean? I don't know what you're trying to tell me, And they called and said, well, it has happened before, not a worry in the voice.
Was it a small airline or airline that you were familiar with that you've used before?
Yeah, I'd used it before, and it's a Cessna Caravans, 12-seater. Yeah, they were going from Arusha to Kilimanjaro to pick up, and then to Central Serengeti.
So from that first phone call, where they just say, we've lost contact with the plane?
Yeah, they were just saying, stand by, maybe nothing type of thing. But deep inside, and that's when you start, trying to control your sympathetic nervous system, which you can never control that. So, they found the wreckage around 2:30 that afternoon. And another company went and found the wreckage, and, it was sort of fairly clear. From that point, it was done.
And you got a phone call saying that the plane had crashed?
I got a phone call that the plane is down, where it's located. So I started then on the phone to all our cars that we had out. You need to go here. I don't care what you're doing. Just go. And they started driving from Arusha, just to get there to see. There was no emergency response as such, no helicopters being sent in, no, you almost had to do it yourself.
So the plane company hadn't sent people in to retrieve the wreckage or retrieve bodies?
Not that I was informed of. Yeah, so I got the actual call to confirm that there was no survivors about 6 p.m. So, and I've got kids coming home from school at this point. So how do you tell a 5-year-old an 11-year-old? It's tough.
What did you do?
In a way, it's a blessing my daughter was 5 years old, because, she has that beautiful pie in the sky thoughts of her dad and how perfect he is, and we'll always have that. But my son said that as soon as he stepped out of the car and saw me, he knew. He knew something had happened to Nas. So, yeah. And by the time he got from school, I didn't have that confirmation. While I know it in my heart, I've still got to say to him, you know, let's just wait and see. Let's just wait and see. And whatever comes, we just deal with it when it comes, type of thing.
Oh,
So,
Donna,
yeah.
how horrible. Did you go out to the site that night?
No.
You? So
No. So we had quite a few people sort of out there and on their way there, because there was a point when, you know, the villages that were within walking distance, I mean hours walking distance, you know, had started going through the wreckage and looking for things to steal, you know. So there was that side of things as well. But, yeah, our guys eventually got there with rangers. And, yeah, they had to stay the night on this big old ancient crater on the side wall, you know, protecting people who could no longer protect themselves. And even then the next day, you know, we were told, yes, we're going to bring them back with helicopter, or we're taking seats out of planes, or there was whole lots of ideas of what was going to happen to get them back. But eventually we sort of said, whatever cars are there, get them in the cars and start driving. So, you know, the bodies weren't brought back until the next evening to Arusha. And Arusha was like a ghost town. It stopped. And, you know, there was like about 60 or more vehicles in convoy, just people joining to drive them back. Because my husband was very well known, very well liked and loved.
Nas was a Muslim.
Yes.
What did that mean for the way the funeral had to happen?
That was also very different for me, and the way we lived, you know. So basically he was in the mortuary that Thursday night, and then the next morning he was brought home to be washed and wrapped.
Back to his family, his parents' home, or to your home?
To our home. To our home, where all the proceedings were going on.
Did you participate in that?
No. You know, I was being told to go and see him and and my children, go and see your father. But I refused, because that's not what I wanted. And I also know in my heart that's what Nas wouldn't have wanted me to have, that, because he was very protective of me and the children, and whatever came, he was always, you know, the guard.
So I suppose the last time you saw him was when he reversed the car to give you a kiss.
Yeah. Yes.
Do you have many photos of the four of you together?
You know, not a lot, but I certainly have some that I treasure. But, you know, Nas was the photographer in the family. And his phones with all the photos of us were taken by the crash investigation, so I don't have those. And he went down with all his photographic equipment, his laptop. So a lot was lost, you know, on top of losing him.
You were there, I guess, in many ways alone with your two children, your husband suddenly taken away from you. Mm-hmm. Why didn't you pack up and come back to your family in Australia?
My parents flew straight over the next day. They were there in time for the funeral. So that was huge for me. And I have some beautiful friends and staff in Arusha and people who love Nas, you know. Even if I didn't know them then, they now are so close to me, you know. I didn't pack up and move because there's 200 people that are relying on me to have an income at the end of the month. And behind every person that works in Tanzania is a whole nother family that relies on that one person. So it's you know, it's got a real snowball effect. So you take out one person, maybe me, then you take out 200 people, and then maybe you take out 2,000 people. And I'm not ready to do that. I'm not ready to make anyone else suffer.
Did people there think you'd fail? Was there an expectation that it was going to be too hard for you to keep the company going?
Absolutely. That was a big worry for a lot of people, you know. And I remember meeting with guides and office and whoever were in town at the time, and I said, I'm here. I'm not going anywhere, you know, and they will start clapping. And yes, Mama, that's what we wanted to hear. That's all we were waiting for. And once you said that, Mama, now you know we're here, we're behind you. We'll make you keep standing, you know. So, and Nas was known as Simba, a lion in Swahili. So now I get the word Mama Simba. Everyone's, Mama Simba, come on, let's go, Mama Simba, stand up. You know, and without these people and this heart to keep me standing, you know, maybe it would be a different outcome. I don't know.
How have the day-to-day operations changed since Nas passed away?
A lot, and greatly, because before I worked from home. You know, I decided, you know, when my son was young, I still worked a lot in the office, you know, and then I had that realisation of, oh my gosh, you know, he's little and there's a lady looking after him in my house, which is only across the road. So we knew that when our daughter was born that I would just work from home. So it's changed from that. And then Nas being the one in the office, him going to the bush all the time, checking camps and that sort of thing. So then it's changed that. For me now, when I'm in Arusha, I'm in the office sort of every day. And if I'm not in the office, I'm out in the bush checking on camps and talking to people. And I have some great people that work with us. You know, now I see, you know, a lot of the people that work with us work for us because they're part of the story, you know. And Nas's cousin has stood up and been such an amazing support. And then people who were camp managers are now general managers and operation managers, and they know that there's a certain point, while I can speak the language and I can figure out what's going on, to have that really local knowledge of day by day, it's them who's going to make it happen. So they've been an incredible support and help as well in keeping things moving.
But I guess at the end of the day, you don't have that partner to talk it all through with. It's on your shoulders, the decisions to make.
No, I don't have that person waking me up at 2 a.m. and 3 a.m. and thinking, hey, what do you think of this design? Or what do you know, should we go for these colours? I was like, what? Yeah, no, I don't have that. But what I do have is I have a roadmap of everything that we talked about and planned. Nas, the most disorganised person in the world, had files on his desktop of this camp, we're going to name it this is what the colour palette is, this is how we're going to do the beds. It's just a roadmap to follow for whatever reason, I don't know why. And the other thing was my phone downloaded with 4,000 of his contacts. So contacts in the national parks, in the environmental agencies, you know, these people that are so important to helping you establish something or teaching you how to do something, they all came into my phone. You know, all I had to do was, hang on, I don't save a phone number as that guy at the Central Market that has a truck. You know, I would save their name and maybe the truck afterwards. And so that's how I knew they were Nas's phone numbers, you know, these weird names that he saved everything under. It's quite funny.
What did you decide to do with the kids, Donna, in terms of their schooling once you were there as a single mum?
So I wanted to give it time and not make rash decisions, you know, being under pressure and under emotion and having lots of things to deal with. So I thought, let me give it a year and see how I go, sort of trying to juggle companies and home life. And for the most part, my father stayed with me in Arusha. And then I eventually sort of realised that I may be good, but I'm not Superwoman. You know, I can't do everything. You know, the reality is I can't do everything to the best of my ability. And I eventually said to my mum, I think I'm going to move them across and put them in school. You know, how do you feel about that?
In Australia.
In Australia. And my mum said, it's the best thing I've ever heard. I just needed it to come from you. You know, essentially now I'm their only child. And my brother has an older daughter who's already has her career underway. So they were sort of said, anything you need, I'm here. We are here to do it. So, so now I bounce back and forth sort of every 4, 5, 6 weeks.
And the kids live with your mum and dad?
They live with my mum and dad. My dad's the school run. The pick up and the drop off is the football supporter on Saturdays. So, you know, watches training. My mum is my private art teacher for my daughter, and, you know, they have fun, but it's exhausting. When you're grandparents raising now young children again, it's exhausting. You know, even as younger parents, it's exhausting.
And exhausting for you too, I guess. You must feel like there's always a part of you in these two places on opposite ends of the earth.
Yeah, it's hard. It's hard because my son's old enough that I can WhatsApp with him, I can chat with him, and, you know, he's very good at communicating as well. My daughter, you know, she gets emotional because she only sees me every so often on a video call. But it's almost like when I'm here, I can allow myself to be with them and be a mum and everything. But when I'm there, I try and focus 24/7 so I don't pull down, you know, and don't let the work down on that side at the same time.
Do you see Nas in your kids?
Yeah. I see looking. My son is a mini Nas, and personality. What would you call it? I don't know. The feisty, the cheeky, the everything is my daughter. So I've got both. I've got both, really. Yeah. To seeing, you know, Nas as someone who's always could find a solution. You know, the biggest problem solver that you've ever met in your life, and the best decision maker, and always spinning it to find solutions to make it a positive outcome.
And he knew the guy in the truck at the market as well.
And he knew the guy in the truck at the markets. And there's truck number 1, 2, 3 and 4. So he knows several guys in the markets with trucks.
Donna, you didn't go to the site where his plane crashed at the time of the accident. Have you been back since?
Yes. We went on the first anniversary. We trekked up. There was probably 50 or 60 of us, mostly our staff from our companies. And we drove up to as close as possible as we could and, set up a memorial. We had prayers for both Christian and Muslim faith because there was mixed faith on the plane. We put a nice memorial with their names on it. And you know what? The ironic thing is it's the most beautiful place.
What's it look like?
It's about 10,000 feet high, so it's high. In the distance, you see Lake Natron, which is this big soda lake flamingo breeding ground. On the right is Empekai, so their plane crashed on the inside wall of one side. But down in Empekai is also a soda lake, takes up the whole floor. So you've got flamingos and then the lush forest everywhere, which is, you know, buffalo and elephant. And
is it a quiet place?
Yeah, there's no one. There's no one. You can see in the distant little Maasai villages, but it's peace. It's peace.
Donna, thank you so much. I know there is a lot more on your story to come, so come back to Conversations and fill us in 5 years' time.
Okay, absolutely. I will do that, Sarah.
Donna Duggan, Director of Maasai Wanderings and Nasikia Camps in Tanzania. Donna has let us know that they are also celebrating their 20th birthday at Maasai Wanderings, so happy birthday to them from us at Conversations. Conversations is recorded on the lands of the Yagara and Turrbal peoples. This story was produced by Michelle Ransom-Hughes. The executive producer of Conversations' 20th anniversary collection is Carmel Rooney. I'm Sarah Konoski. Thanks for listening.
You've been listening to a podcast of Conversations with Sarah Konoski. For more Conversations interviews, head to the website abc.net.au/conversations.